All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Aroshi Ghosh, and I'm the founder of AI Spectra. And today we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Kumaresh Pattabiraman. All right. So Mr. Pattabiraman is currently the Senior Director of Product at LinkedIn, where he leads teams building products that helps millions of people find jobs, develop the right skills, and form communities. Today, he'll be joining us to talk about his career journey and how his passion for AI led him to be where he is today. All right, with that, I will pass it on to Mr. Pattabiraman.
Awesome. Hey, it's absolutely exciting to be here with such an incredible group of students. It takes me back to the time when I was in my 10th grade and had some pivotal kind of career choices I had to make at that point in time. First, huge kudos to all of you for being part of such an important initiative with AI Spectra. I'll probably take something like 20 minutes to just walk you through some of the moments in my story so far, and then leave a good 25 minutes for questions that you have for me. And any questions are welcome. Like, I'm here just to have an informal chat with all of you. With that, I'll get started. So quick introduction, as Aroshi mentioned, I lead product teams at LinkedIn, which is a company that, not sure if you've used LinkedIn.com. It's a product that helps people find jobs, connect with each other, be part of professional communities, and ultimately, we help people develop skills that will help them find jobs that they consider dream jobs, that they would ultimately lead to careers that people will feel proud of. So with that context, I wanted to start with kind of where it all started for me in this journey. I used to, back when I was just about your age, I think when I was like in my 7th grade, I used to play chess, and I thought I'll become a professional chess player as a career. And there came this point in time when, for the first time, the best chess player was pitted against the best machine that played chess. It was called Deep Blue, and the best chess player was Kasparov. And there was this huge match where Kasparov played Deep Blue. And guess who won? Does anyone know? No? Okay. Well, Deep Blue won. And this was the first time a machine defeated man in a sport that you would consider to be highly intellectual, like one that required you to understand chess positions really, really well. Until this point, humans were significantly better than machines at playing chess. This was one of those moments where there were lots of conspiracy theories immediately after this happened. For even Kasparov was like, hey, I don't think this is a machine playing. I think there are a bunch of humans that are assisting the machine and making moves. I can't believe that I lost to a machine. This was the first moment when I had a moment of realization that I should probably try to be part of the winning side, because it became clear that machines were going to be better than humans at chess. And that's when I heard about the two words, artificial intelligence. And it was a bit of an oxymoron in that, like, how could intelligence possibly be artificial, right? Like, it's something that you typically associate with humans, and human creativity has no bounds. Like, how do you artificially model that? That was the point in time when I started learning more about how these machines learn to play chess. Well, the way they learn to play chess is by looking at millions of games that have been played in history and learning from those patterns in those moves from what humans have done for several hundred years. Except this machine could crunch through, millions of games in a matter of hours, and could now benefit from just learning from the mistakes that may have been made by millions of humans. So at some point in time, with machines getting a lot more processing power, them being able to just consume a lot more data, you've got to imagine that at some point they'll get better than humans. It just happened to be at this time when I was in my 10th grade, and I had to make a choice on whether I wanted to continue pursuing chess professionally or do something else. I chose to do something else, and that something else was to learn computer science. In particular, the part that intrigued me the most was this notion of artificial intelligence in computer science. So I did a bachelor's in engineering, focusing on computer science and artificial intelligence. And subsequently, I'm just going to quickly walk you through the next steps in that journey. I finished my engineering bachelor's, did an internship at Google, which I was also intrigued about, in that how can like a single search box answer the questions to everything in the world, right? Like from billions of people. Like, even today I was just searching, how do I pronounce Aroshi? Like, how do I pronounce a name, right? Because it is a new name. Well, Google had the answer. So that was a moment where I was like, okay, so the same artificial intelligence that helped Deep Blue defeat Kasparov is now helping answer the questions that billions of people have that they type into a search box. After that, I decided I needed to get a PhD in artificial intelligence. So I decided that I'll come to UIUC, University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, where I started off on this graduate program, and within a year or so, I realized that companies in technology, especially companies in the Valley, in Silicon Valley, had a lot more access to data and to machines, and hence were a lot better at doing artificial intelligence work than even some of the leading universities that were doing academic research. The big difference was that, for example, if you are Google, you have data from billions of people doing searches every day, and you're able to build more intelligent systems as a result of having access to that kind of data. You also have the capital needed to invest in building machines and hiring engineers that can go build these AI systems. So as a result, what I decided was 1 year into my graduate program, I decided to go do an internship. I first did an internship at Citadel, which is a hedge fund. It's a fund where machines do trades using artificial intelligence. And I know that the speaker earlier today told you a little bit more about this. So I did a little bit of that, but at some point, what I realized was that my personal passion was not about helping machines make money. I wanted to instead help machines help human beings in some tangible ways. So that's when I decided I was going to go work at Microsoft Research. So I dropped out of my PhD program with a master's, and I went to Microsoft to start doing some AI research. And it was awesome to just have access to the kinds of machines and data that Microsoft had. At some point in that journey, I realized that researchers tend to write a lot of papers, but some of those papers may not deliver value to people in our lifetimes. What I mean by this is you do a lot of research, you write papers, you publish them. They may inspire many other researchers to pursue directions that you may have in mind. But the big question for me was, can I instead apply that research to build AI systems myself that can deliver value to people? And that's when I decided to switch from a researcher to an engineer. And after 3 years of building engineering systems that powered search products at Microsoft, the next big question for me was, hey, no matter how awesome the technology of the products I built was, it wasn't quite giving me the same pleasure as building products and user experiences. So there's the underlying technology, which has all the intelligence that goes into building these systems. But on top of it, you see design, you see choices that you've made and creating great user experiences. for users of your product. So that's when I was introduced for the first time to this function called product management. Since then, I switched from Seattle to the Bay Area. I moved and became part of LinkedIn. LinkedIn, as a company, its mission is to, its vision is to create economic opportunity for everyone in the world. And I found a personal liking towards that mission because I felt I could use AI to help create opportunity for everyone in the world. And the way we would do that, for the last 8 years, I've been building many different products and teams that involve AI that help people develop skills, find the right jobs, make sure they are paid fairly, and ultimately find communities that will help them advance in their careers. So I wanted to quickly just show you a few examples of the kinds of products that we build, just to bring everything that I just described to you a bit to life. So let me just share my screen. Give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Yes, awesome. Cool. I'm going to give you 3 quick examples of artificial intelligence in action. The first one is something called LinkedIn salary. So one of the biggest problems that we saw in the professional world was that people weren't getting paid equally for equal amounts of work. In particular, females were often being underpaid relative to males. People in underrepresented groups were often getting paid lower relative to people in comparable groups that just had a different racial or ethnical background. So how do we solve a problem like this? Well, we wanted to bring a higher degree of transparency to who gets paid what by building a product called LinkedIn Salary. So what we do here is giving people an understanding of the pay ranges and the median pay for every job. So this is, for example, what product managers in San Francisco Bay Area get paid. And you'll also see that if you are in one of these companies, you can just click on one of these companies and you now get an understanding of what the compensation range is if you are a product manager at Stripe. So what this meant was that people had access to more information with which they'd be able to negotiate their salaries and get paid fairly. And this will eventually help close the wage gap across all these dimensions that I told you about: gender, age, ethnicity. Ultimately, we would consider it a massive success if people were paid fair wage and equal wage for the same amount of work they did. So that's one example. A second example is where people, so let's say I'm trying to hire a product manager. I go to LinkedIn and I do a search for product manager. LinkedIn has a lot of AI that decides who to show amongst the millions of people on LinkedIn, right? So there's a search system that decides, hey, I'm going to show Akash, Partha, Preeti, Zoe, Cameron in this order. Now, how do we make sure that the AI systems don't have biases in them? How do we make sure we give fair representation across those dimensions that I told you about, right? Across genders, across ethnicities, across ages. In a similar vein, you'll notice that this is a relatively diverse set of results that represents a good mix of females and males, whites and blacks and Latinos and Asians. Age is something that we are still working through. So these are just a few examples that you can imagine the role that AI plays in helping ensure there's a level playing field for everyone in the world. A third example that I wanted to show you is an insights product that we build that helps companies make talent decisions more effectively. So let's say you are LinkedIn You're the CEO of LinkedIn, and you want to know how diverse your workplace, your workforce is. Well, we generate reports that say, hey, you have 18,000 employees. You've hired 2,870 employees in the last year, and you've had 18% attrition. Attrition is just like people leaving the company. And then you see here gender diversity. So LinkedIn's composition is 54% male and 46% female, according to the best information that LinkedIn has. Now, we can do this for any company in the world and help bring an additional level of consciousness for these leaders to build more diverse workplaces. And by the way, AI Spectra is at the core of trying to solve this problem, because if you look at something like how this gender diversity breaks by function, you'll notice that in sales, it's 47% female and 53% male. Whereas in engineering, this is not great. The fact that we only have 25% females and we have 75% males. So this is why it's critical that even bringing this level of insights, it leads ultimately to these companies thinking harder about how they create more diverse workplaces. And it highlights to you why initiatives like AI Spectra are critical in solving this problem of gender diversity in specifically technology disciplines. So that I hope gives you an idea of the kinds of products that we build at LinkedIn. I wanted to quickly share with you. I realize we have like about 3 minutes for the talking portion, and then I wanted to open it up to questions for you. So if I had to kind of just sum it up, a career that starts in some form of sports and then switches to AI, and then even in a 7th or an 8th grade, for someone to be able to completely change their careers and pick up computer science as a discipline, right? And then artificial intelligence as a sub-discipline within computer science. And then to be able to eventually find their way thinking I'm going to go do a PhD in AI, but no, that doesn't work. I'm going to go to a hedge fund, not so much fun. I'm going to go work on a search product and do some research. And then I realized, I really want to do engineering and not research. And then I realized I really want to do product management and not engineering. And then within product management, I want to work for a company that helps people find opportunities by creating a level playing field. That's the story that I just want you all to take away, which is, I think there is no linear path. There is no you do this and then this and then this, and then you'll do something else, right? You can do whatever you're passionate about, so long as you're giving it your best, and you can ultimately find your way towards something that you're extremely passionate about. And the only other thing I'll leave you with is, when I reflect on my family's journey, when I go back 100 years, I think about my grandfather, my great-grandfather. They were in a village, in a farming community. And they chose to insist to send my dad to a nearby city to go get educated. And it was that access to education that in turn allowed my dad to insist that I go study computer science. And when I had a choice of working, working at Google or go pursue higher education, I had the privilege of being able to go pursue higher education. Again, thanks to access to education, because the state of Illinois funded my education, without which I wouldn't have been able to afford that. As I think about this journey of going from a village to a city to another country, and now I have 2 kids. They're 3 years and 1 year, 6 months old. I think about their journey, and I can already see that my dream for them, but it's totally up to them to decide what they want to do, is to go to space, to go to Mars, right? And the way that happens is, again, by having access to education and to opportunities. So at some level, if we can think about leveling that playing field by democratizing access to education and opportunities, you can see the kind of social mobility it creates for people from very difficult or modest economic and social backgrounds to eventually, over the course of 2, 3, 4 generations, be able to go wherever they want in their lives. And that's why I think companies like LinkedIn, initiatives like AI Spectra, and technologies like artificial intelligence are at the heart of democratizing access to education and opportunity. So with that, I'm going to pass.
That kind of ties into why AI Spectra was created, because of the gap in the gender gap between the number of women in STEM compared to the number of men in STEM. And a lot of it was mainly because around middle school, which is a lot of the where you guys are at right now, that's when middle school girls and non-binary students are kind of directed towards other paths away from STEM. And it can be very hard sometimes to keep them on that STEM journey because of like the way there's societal bias for almost everything, right? We kind of talked about that in the first presentation. So our goal over here as like AI Spectra is to kind of tie in those humanity fields that people might be interested in and show how it can apply to STEM and how you can actually continue this journey even if you have interest in other fields. All right, so with that, I think we can move on to Q&A. So if you'd like to ask a question by unmuting, just quickly raise your hand or just feel free to unmute. Or if you'd rather ask in the chat and have one of the AI Spectra team members ask it for you, that is also completely fine. But to just get started, so working at LinkedIn means that you also are working with a lot of PII, which is like personal identifiable information, right? And that can cause like a lot of privacy concerns. So how do you, as one of the engineers and one of the people who are in charge of creating these AI models, ensure that this information does not reflect the outcome of your models or put those people at a disadvantage in any way?
Excellent question. So I'll take an example. You just saw the salary product that showed you, how much people were paid, right? How do we even collect information like that? We request our members to give us their salary information under the promise of anonymization and secure storage of that data. Now, obviously, this is some of the most private information that people have, right? Like how much they earn. Now, it's critical to design systems that are storing such personally identifiable information in highly secure systems, not just secure by way of people from outside of LinkedIn being able to access it, but even people from within LinkedIn being able to access it. So what we have is extreme levels of both security as well as even within LinkedIn logs of who can access it. So, for example, an engineer on the team cannot just say, "Hey, I'm going to go look up what Aroshi earns." It's not doable. Why? Because that's a violation of privacy for Aroshi, who trusted LinkedIn to give that information, right? So, what we do is something called anonymization, where we remove every attribute that will help, that will ensure that this data point that we have is only used on the aggregate. So what we mean by aggregate is let's say that there are thousands of engineers at Google who have given us their salaries, right? We would remove the names, the attributes such as where they work, which locations, what's their years of experience. We take that all aside and only use the data points on the aggregate to create those charts that you saw in that product. So you saw, for example, this range of, hey, people may earn in this location, in this function of product management, they earn between $120,000 and $200,000. How do we create that? It's using this process of anonymization. It's a critical thing, not just for like data points like salary, but even more so for, let's just say, even gender or pronouns. Like we recently added the ability for people to be able to identify themselves using a free text field, right? It can be, she, her, he, him, they, them. It could be something else. And these are like some of the most private pieces of information people share. Now, what we do is like have differing levels of security for all forms of data that we collect from our users. And I will say that the security teams powering these are like some of the most advanced forms of technology, because they need to think hard about how are possible attackers going to access this information, and they need to prevent every such possible attack to make sure we protect the privacy of our users.
All right, great question. So, I mean, great answer. So I think another question that a lot of people were having in the chat was people have heard about like these new facial recognition companies which handle job interviews, right? So especially during the pandemic. So what ends up happening is instead of going to like the first level job interview in person, you would have like a job interview with a computer in a sense, right? And with that, there's a lot of concerns about like, is it ethical to have a computer make that first baseline decision whether you should go to the next level of the interview process? What are some biases that might occur? So I just want to hear some thoughts that you may have, since you do work in the job hiring and connecting field. So yeah.
That's an excellent question again. By the way, I can tell you that when I was in my 6th grade, these aren't the kinds of questions that I would ask. So this group is an incredibly accomplished group, and I'm super excited to be having this conversation. So let's think about the problem we are trying to solve here, which is, let's just say I post a job and it gets 10,000 applications within the first week, like 10,000 people interested in the job. It may not be humanly possible for me to look at every one of those 10,000 applications to decide who to bring to the interview stage next. So there may be times when I will rely on technology by defining an objective set of criteria. But no matter how objective, so I'll give you examples, right? Like I can say, hey, run a Java coding test and have only people that pass it amongst the 10,000 people come to the next stage. Would we say that's objective? For the most part, because it's the same test that we're going to give 10,000 people. But what if the first 1,000 people that took the test shared the exact same test with the remaining 9,000 that are applying afterwards? So what you'll need is a different set of tests, right? Like you'll probably want to just be able to switch those questions around, bring some randomness to what people get asked. And then is that going to cause some biases? To some extent, because it depends on whether the questions you get asked are easy or hard. There's that. Beyond that, there are other criteria that people may say, like, hey, I need 5+ years of experience for this job. Now, does that mean that a college graduate who may have worked really hard and may be excellent at what she or he does, would it mean that that person is now not qualified for this job? Well, unfortunately, using the subjective criteria of 5+ years of experience, the answer is yes, because the hiring manager chose to set the criteria that way. Increasingly, what you'll see is that as the number of such jobs are increasing, as the demand for more and more such high technology jobs increase, you'll see that the hiring companies and the hiring managers cannot be as selective as they used to be, because there are only so many people with 5+ years of experience that can pass the Java test, that are available for hire across the entire world. And so more often than not, you end up relaxing those criteria to be able to get more diverse talent from across the world. And the way we do that ultimately is to go from these criteria that involve any kind of criteria that are like differentiating based on age or gender, or even nationality, as an example, right, where you may need a work visa or not. The more and more we go from these into skills-based hiring, and the more and more we invest in objectively validating skills through machines that lay out what we call screening tests. But these screening tests are as objective as they can possibly be in assessing the pure skills that someone brings to the table, as opposed to all these other factors that I mentioned, the more fair the whole hiring process will become. And you'll see that a number of companies that are hiring at scale, like for example, Amazon plans to hire 500,000 people in the next 6 months. They don't have the manpower to go screen the millions of applications that will come in for those 500,000 jobs. And what they're doing is investing heavily in these automated screening tests that will assess people by skills as opposed to all these other factors.
Oh, I actually had a question. My question was to find your passion and really know that your passion was engineering and AI.
Amelia, sorry, I missed the first part of that question. Could you repeat it?
Oh, my question was, how did you find your passion and really know that your passion was in engineering and AI?
As I described the journey, I still don't know if engineering and AI is my passion, to be honest with you. It just started off with this moment where I realized the machine defeated a man, and hence I would rather be on the winning side by programming machines instead of being the man that's getting defeated. And then after that, I go through this journey of trying my hand at engineering and then at product management. Product management, by the way, is related to engineering, but it's very different in terms of what you do day to day. Like, you don't code all day. You spend a lot more time with people, right? You're building products with designers, data scientists, marketers, and of course engineers. These are teams of highly cross-functional people from many different disciplines, many different walks of life, that come together to build technology products. So in that sense, that's where I am currently, which is I love product management because it allows me to build products that I know make a difference in people's lives, because they help them find jobs, find the right pay, and so on. But to be honest, in 5 years from today, if I were to tell you that I would be just as passionate about product management and about AI, I don't know, because if you just look at that history of the last 15 years and the kinds of choices I've made, there's a lot of serendipity built into it, right? And so that's one of the reasons why I would encourage all of you to have a general kind of idea of where you want to go and what you want to do in this world. That idea could be something like, hey, I want to help the most number of people by making a difference in their lives. Now, how you make that difference? Well, it could be by building products. It could be by entering politics. It could be by entering social service jobs. And all of those options are kind of wide open. One of the things that I think about AI in particular as having this power is that of enabling you to solve problems across all these disciplines. It's just phenomenal how AI is at the core of helping people find information through a search box, in the case of Google, finding jobs in the case of LinkedIn, finding communities, right? Like I'm a new dad, and I have a new dads group on Facebook that I found because an AI system recommended this group to me after Facebook learned that I was interested in like finding communities for dads. The application of AI is so expansive to the point where I wouldn't necessarily even say engineering is the only path in which you can build AI systems. By just learning AI in such early stages of your life, right, like in the 6th to 10th grade, it makes the world of difference, because like tomorrow you may be in policy making, and you may have to make a decision that impacts the lives of, let's just say, your local community of 100,000 people. How will you make those decisions? Well, you look for data on what may be the preferences or habits or behaviors of 100,000 people, and how do you even process data at that scale? Well, if you knew what you can do with AI, even in a policy making role, you may say, hey, you know what? Can we apply AI to understand the needs of this community of 100,000 people better so that I can make the right policy decisions? So in that sense, like I would encourage you to kind of keep those options wide open while learning AI for sure. Yeah.
So we have a quick question from one of the students. So they noticed that tomorrow's schedule includes like a whole session on NLP, natural language processing. And actually that's the field that I like to do most of my projects and research in. So I'm also very excited to hear about this question. But in the job hiring field, what is like the biggest application of natural language processing within like either work that LinkedIn does or other job hiring companies?
It's an excellent question again. If you take what's at the heart of the jobs marketplace, you have recruiters on the one side and you have candidates on the other side, and they're trying. It's a little bit of a matchmaking exercise, right? Like similar to a Match.com or a Tinder or any of these other apps, right? Like you have two different parties, right? And you're trying to match them. It just turns out that in jobs in particular, the recruiter has a job description, which is typically like a Word doc that has 600 words that describe what the job is and what its requirements are. And then you have the candidates on the other side who typically have a LinkedIn profile or a resume. And most of these AI systems that are tasked with matchmaking, they need to take, so you have these candidates that are applying to these jobs, and then you have these recruiters that are screening those applicants, typically with a resume or a LinkedIn profile. These AI systems, what they can do is try to apply natural language processing to understand the 600 words that exist in the job description from the recruiter better, and then the words that may be in a resume from an applicant better, to see if this applicant meets the requirements that are in that job description. How much of a fit is there between this applicant and this job? right? So that's the kind of matchmaking problems that natural language processing plays a very important role in. If anything, because I think humans are great with communicating through sentences. However, when you need an AI system, a machine, to derive meaning out of those sentences, to be able to do complex tasks like matchmaking, right? You can. That's where the role that natural language processing plays becomes critical, because it's almost trying, like what it's doing is translating human sentences into like machine understandable transformations. And then once it has these like machine understandable transformations, it ends up doing the matchmaking and deciding, hey, candidates 1, 20, and like 100 are the best fits for this particular job description. So hiring manager, why don't you take a look at these 3 candidates, right? So that's like the most obvious example I can think of.
One thing I want to add on to that is actually AI in general is a very it's a very fast growing field, but specifically in NLP, I forgot how recent it was, but they started making new algorithms. It's like BERT embeddings and stuff, right? We'll cover this a little bit more in tomorrow's session, but I just think it's really exciting because these new ways to like vectorize words or like turn our natural languaging, like our English words, into like numbers for the computer to process. It's now actually studying the metadata or the context within the words to try and create better matches, which is very different from what previous algorithms such as Word2Vec and TF-IDF used to do, because those would take like the dictionary definition of the word rather than the semantic meaning. So just very fast and interesting field. Sahana, I think you had one question.
Yeah, so just before the speaker session module, we did a module on blockchain, and we learned that it's like a distributed database that holds digital records. So how is blockchain used and integrated at LinkedIn?
Sahana, that's such a hard question. And, I'm just amazed, to be honest, at how, like, I didn't expect embeddings, Word2Vec, TF-IDF, and blockchain come up in this forum. It's fascinating to me. So I think we are in very early days of how to apply blockchain to real world problems. And I think we are just scratching the surface. In fact, I would say the same thing about AI too, except AI may have a head start of like 20 to 30 years of people trying to apply it to specific problems, whereas blockchain is hardly like 10 years old max, and has become more of a thing only recently. So as of right now, I'm not aware of complex problems that blockchain is applied to at LinkedIn, but the kinds of problems that I'm excited about it being applied to in the future are problems like, let's say that an employee at a company does a body of work. Let's say they've worked at, let's say an engineer has worked at Yahoo for 3 years, and they've done excellent work. They've picked up a set of skills. Now, that set of skills belongs to the employee, right? Like they've developed those skills through that body of work. Now, let's just say they choose to quit Yahoo and go to another company. Let's just say Netflix instead. How do they take these records of the fact that they worked on certain technologies for a 3-year period, and that they were an expert at those technologies? How do they take those records with them, no matter who they work for, and over a period of time build an identity of the body of work that they've done over several years of their life. One of the most promising technologies out there that will make something like this happen is blockchain. And a lot of companies are looking into how to enable employees to preserve, protect, and like over a period of time, accumulate skills that they've collected over a period of time through a blockchain identifiable mode. And I would say we are at least 5 to 10 years away from making something like that happen.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, I think currently the three major companies, at least that I know of, that are actually going into the blockchain field and building platforms for blockchain developers are one, Ethereum, which is an open source one. And then I know IBM and Oracle are also doing some, but that's more like for private licensing and stuff. So although we may not cover too much blockchain coding throughout this bootcamp, definitely check out at least Ethereum to see how you can further your skills on that later on after the event. All right, so I think that's all the questions we have today. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Pattabiraman. We were really excited to hear your talk about your career journey, and thank you for indulging us with all of our very hard to answer questions. But yeah, I think that concludes our speaker session.
Awesome. It was a pleasure. I'm going to keep cheering you on the side and hopefully have my kids join AI Spectra as soon as possible.
Yeah.